this is the next video, and it is on chapters 5 through 6, which has everything to do with civil liberties and civil rights. So first, most important, you have to know the difference between civil liberties and civil rights. And yeah, that's pretty confusing because, you know, kind of get them all jumbled up in your head. I get them all jumbled in my head every once in a while. And so civil liberties is a person is guaranteed, you know, the guarantees and freedoms that the government can't take away. So it's basically all your rights of freedom too. It's all the freedoms too. So like you have the freedom to protest, the freedom to assemble, the freedom of speech, freedom of right. So it's all the things that you're allowed to do that the government gives you. And then civil rights is the government's protected rights. So it's a freedom from. So like everything that you're protected from, and the government's gonna make sure that they can't do this to you, and that no one else can do this to you. Alright, so the next big thing that is obvious because we're really talking about civil rights and civil liberties is the Bill of Rights. So you should know that they're the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, and it's basically your civil liberties. And yeah. And you know, the next couple key concepts, they're all kind of interrelated to each other. So the first one is due clause, which is guaranteed a variety of rights. So that's all the rights you're kind of guaranteed to. There's the substantive due process, which protects citizens from unjust state and federal law. So that's basically like, hey, we're gonna make sure that any law created cannot interfere with your rights and can't harm you or cause any kind of injustice towards you in any which way possible from any kind of form of the government. The next one is the incorporation due process, which requires the states and local governments must guarantee the Bill of Rights into the law. So before, it wasn't really the Bill of Rights only applies to the national government, the state governments. But then after this incorporation due process, it's like, hey, y'all have to include this. This is a part of the national government. It's part of the Constitution. It's part of the national government. It has to be a part of the state and local laws too. The Bill of Rights, they need it. Then you have the selective incorporation, which means that most of the Bill of Rights and national government laws, stuff have to be incorporated, but not all of them. Most, but not all of them. So they get to pick which ones apply to their state. And then there's fundamental freedoms, which is basically the basic rights you have as a human being. And then you have the Establishment Clause, which basically means that the government cannot establish any kind of religion, because that's wrong, and we're kind of a melting pot, so you can't really pick any one religion. You'd have to make a whole new thing, clicklyism, to incorporate everyone together, but you can't do that because it's against the Constitution, so you can't do that. There's the Free Exercise Clause, which means that, hey, you want to be a Quigleyist? Do you want to be a Catholic? Do you want to be Protestant? Do you want to be a Jew? You can practice whatever religion you have because you have that right. And then there's this thing called the limit test, which is basically we're gonna see whether or not this is actual religion. We're gonna test, what kind of religion this is a test of religion and stuff that was created. It was just a weird test. There is the prior restraint, which is a very important thing that you have to know, which is basically the government's so we can't stop you from writing this in this book, or saying this on a radio show or TV or just in general. We can't stop you, but after you say it, we're so gonna arrest you, because there's nothing saying that we can't do anything to you after you said it, because you have the right to speech. It's a press, but we can still do stuff to you after you've written it. We can't stop you from doing it or saying it or writing it, but we're still gonna get you afterwards if you do. Then there's the clear and present danger test, which is basically you can't do anything that's going to cause a clear and present danger. So don't go into an airport and yell bomb. Don't go into a movie theater and yell fire if there is no bomb or fire. You can't do that because people are going to panic and it's going to be mass hysteria. It's horrible and you're going to go to jail. Then there's the protected speech, you know, there are certain speeches that are protected and unprotected. So protected speech is basically like you have like symbolic speech. You want to wear black armband to protest the Vietnam War, which, well, example from the past. You know, you can do that. It's symbolic and that's protected. If you want to hold a banner, it's protected. If you dress up in a rainbow onesie and go to Russia, okay, no, well, not Russia because I don't know about them, but like, you know, if you want to dress up in a rainbow onesie, be like, I support gay rights, but you're not gonna say it. Like, that's still symbolic speech, so that's protected. Other forms of symbolic speech, like hate speech, which is unprotected because you can't do hate speech. There's specific types like libel, which is written words that's basically like with the intent of like hurting someone or spreading lies that you know, like you're intentionally spreading them and you know it's a lie, which you can't do because it's wrong. Libel is written wrong, you get in trouble. Then there's slander, which is the same thing as libel, but you say it. So slander, slay, and then the S means like sinister, like it's bad, it's evil. Ooh, don't do it because you'll get in trouble. And it's wrong and it's mean. And then there's this court case called New York Times Co. versus Sullivan, which says that actual malice must be proven to support findings that libel against a public figure. So it's this whole little, it's a very important court because you just have to remember the words like actual malice, and that's a very important word, like it's quoted and everything. It's very important to symbolic speech. Then there's these things called fighting words, which is basically it's fighting words. Like you're making, like it's words that you say to someone else that makes them want to punch you in the face, which you can't do. And you can't punch the person in the face either because that's assault, and that you can't do either. And then there's this thing called obscenity, which is basically like porn and like showing sex and stuff and body parts in movies and shows, and it can't really be defined. It's really hard to define. Like where is that line? So it's really weird, but you have to know what it is. Then there's this thing called the writs of habeas corpus, and you should know, like, Abraham Lincoln illegally suspended it during the Civil War because it wasn't an actual, like, declared war. But basically, it's the rights that a person has when you're being arrested. Like, they can't just, like, you know how, like, when you watch all those cop shows, which I do, and they're, like, caged, so we can't hold you more than, like, 48 hours. So they can hold you 48 hours without pressing charges, but that's as long as they can. That's because of habeas corpus. Like, they can't hold you indefinitely. Like, they have to charge you with something and throw you in jail and then in prison. But they can't just be like, so we're gonna hold you in here in captivity. It's basically a captivity, but they can't do that. Then there's the Fourth and Fifth Amendment talk about Miranda rights, Miranda versus Arizona, double jeopardy, and the exclusionary rule. So so let's start with Miranda versus Arizona because that brought up Miranda. So Miranda's this guy and he got arrested. He didn't know anything about his rights when he was arrested. He appealed it, which brought up the Miranda rights named after him. So that's like your right to remain silent, you have the right to an attorney. If you do not have one, you will be provided with one. That's a public defender, which like they're not always so basically you have to, when you're arrested, you have to be aware of your rights. If you're not arrested, then you can't be, then the case is thrown out of court because they have to do that because that's your right to know what your rights are when being arrested. Like you have the right to remain silent and everything. Like you don't have to incriminate yourself against the dog. You have the right to be like, hey, I need a lawyer. Double jeopardy clause is basically you can't be convicted or charged of the same crime twice. Like if I'm gonna be like, hey, I'm charging you with like murder 1, I can't come back, and then if it fails and you don't get convicted for whatever reason, I can't be like, hey, murder 1, or I can be like, hey, murder 2. That's different. It's not murder 1, so I can do that. And then there's the exclusionary rule, which is basically like, hey, you obtain all this stuff illegally, or like we can't bring up certain information in court, so you have to exclude it from the court case. Like I can't bring up someone else's testimony, or I can bring up this evidence, or I can bring up like this witness or something like that, but like they're excluded from that. Then the Sixth Amendment also talks about, you know, the rights of counsel, which I already said. You know, Gideon versus Wainwright, you know, that's the court case that brought up the right to have counsel, which is a lawyer, that's what counsel is. Then there's the right to privacy, which the biggest one is Roe versus Wade, which is like birth control for women. Women have the right to have privacy over whether or not they're taking birth control. So